Welcome to the show, Brain Health, Unchaining Your Pain. And I am really excited and really intrigued, actually, also to welcome Violet Detre to the show. Welcome to the show, Violet.
Hi, thank you so much, Dr. Ruth. I'm excited to be here.
So Violet and I got connected, I think, through a guy knows a guy. I'm not 100% sure how we got connected, but I thought your story was absolutely fascinating and such an important one in the context of mental health awareness. And we're in Mental Health Awareness Month at the moment, which is May. The topic for this discussion is always all about suicide prevention and your journey that you've been on in the context of that theme. So for those that don't know Violet, she's just a phenomenal person. She's a happiness advocate. She's a speaker, best-selling co-author of Ready, Set, Go with Brian Tracy and host of the SuccessPath Show on YouTube. And Violet's vision is for an empowered church body to create on earth as it is in heaven. And she became a Christian at 8 years old, but was stunted by some health issues and unfortunate circumstances and life challenges. And I think we're going to dive into those as part of this show. So welcome to the show, Violet. So excited for you to be here.
Yes, I'm excited too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So Violet, I'd love to know, before we get into your story, what are you really passionate about in life right now?
I am super passionate about joy, about enjoying life, about encouraging other people, about bringing hope and sharing my story, and knowing that you can do business and life with joy. That's one of my passions right now.
Do you know, I love that because it's so important. We often, especially if you think about the pandemic that we've been in, is some people have had that really sucked out of them, haven't they? Because of their circumstances have changed, their work may have changed, their family environment may have changed. They may have suffered losses in their family as a consequence. And I think it's very easy, isn't it, for us to lose it so quickly, that feeling of joy and happiness in the world. And I know it wasn't always that way for you. So I'd love to know, in the context of your life's journey, what does optimum brain health mean for you personally?
Yes, Dr. Ruth. Well, I know you mentioned that we just came out of a pandemic, but we're actually going into another season of uncertainty.
Right.
And so I'm so happy that you are bringing this to everybody's attention right now. But for me, optimal health, I picture it like Dr. Leaf says, that your brain is like a garden, and those thoughts that you create, you can create healthy trees, or you can create, ugly, wicked trees. And what I noticed in my journey is that the more I feed the positivity, the more I feed the faith, the stronger mentally I become, and I'm able to guard off all the negativity. Whereas if I feed the fear, I focus on the other things, then that's when my mindset starts spiraling down. And so I think also a joyous brain is a healthy brain.
Absolutely. And I love that analogy, because we often, if we think about those thoughts, we like to call them automatic negative thoughts or ants in our mind, it's very easy for us to focus on the negative thoughts that we keep telling ourselves. And like you say, they kind of amplify, the ants multiply in our head, and we start creating this enormous colony of ants that aren't serving us, rather than, creating that lovely Garden of Eden, as it were, where you've got beautiful trees growing that are really going to serve you and going to use the light that you bring to them, rather than, feeling like they're stuck in the darkness and in the shadows all the time. I'd love to know where your journey started. So I know you mentioned that you were Christian from age 8. Could you take us back to your childhood and how your childhood evolved, if you're happy to go there?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I'm happy to be as authentic and transparent as possible, because I know that that's only going to help other people. They're going to be saying, I'm not the only one that went through this. If this lady can get out of the muck that she was in from what she came from, then I can do it too. So I'm happy to share. I was a Christian at 8 years old, but even prior to that, we were Catholic and we attended church all the time. And I remember feeling God when the priest used to share stories about the Bible. And, I just really feel connected to God all of my life. And then an evangelist came to our town. I came forward. I gave my heart to Christ. But I remember when I was about 5 years old, I had been molested by a family member.
Wow.
And that's, I think, when a lot of it started, because I try to protect myself from the bad, from the negativity, but that kept me away from all the good stuff too.
Right.
And from there, I started getting a lot of health issues. I would be constipated. I had stomach issues. I would be sick all the time. And that was also probably the emotions trying to, because I was suppressing all these emotions and I didn't talk about what happened to me.
Sure.
I started having health issues. Then on top of that, they tried to medicate me with antibiotics, which made things worse. And then I had metal toxicity in because of the mercury I had in my teeth, which I don't know if it was maybe correlated with the emotional issues, but that was something else that happened. And I started having brain fog.
Right.
When I was in school, that was one of the things that made me feel normal, made me feel like I was important, because I was a gifted and talented student. And they had the structure. They told me what to do, so I felt safe and I was thriving. But then when I came out of school, the brain fog got worse and worse. So I lost that part of me. The part that I was holding on to, it was like, oh no, I'm not that smart person, anymore. So how am I going to get validation? And also, because I was a Christian, I didn't really feel part of, I didn't feel normal. I felt a little bit like a freak, because a lot of people were into all these things that my parents, they tried to shelter me from.
Yeah.
So that was rejection. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. Then I wasn't succeeding. I couldn't find a job. And what finally, the straw that broke the camel's back was that my grandfather, he got ill.
Right.
And I was in a charismatic church where we saw a lot of healings. I was Holy Spirit filled. And I prayed for my grandfather and I felt a peace. I felt like God told me he's going to be okay. And I had come into this prayer like, I'm just going to go for it and fight it. And, but I just said a quick prayer and I felt a peace. So I said, okay, I'll let it go. But a few days later, my grandfather passed away. And my faith plummeted. I was like, God, are you real? Are you not hearing me? Like, and all these thoughts were coming on, just adding on to things about myself that were not true, that I was unloved. And then because I couldn't get a job, I was a burden to my husband. He was the only one that could bring in income to the family. I felt useless. And then I just lost hope. And, where do you go when you have no hope? And one of the things that in the church world people say is that, wow, well, here we're going to have trouble, but in heaven, it's going to be amazing. So I was like, why don't I skip this part? Because
heaven's going to be great. So let's go there.
Exactly. And I was like in such extreme pain. I was in pain mentally, emotionally, physically. I was in pain. And I was like, God, I made myself a toxic cocktail and I'm like, God, I'll see you in a bit. But thank God that my husband, he felt Holy Spirit tell him, get home. And usually he was a soldier back then. So he was used to work late hours. But this time he heard Holy Spirit. He came home. He found me unconscious. I was
Wow.
already cold and gray. He rushed me to the ER and they brought me back to life. And that
Wow.
was the last time that I had an attempt, because I had multiple suicide attempts, even though I was a Christian, Holy Spirit filled, tongue talking, evangelical, loved God and went to church almost every day, twice on Sunday. But then God took me on this journey where he started revealing a lot of things, uncovering the lies, revealing truth. And now it's over 10 years and I've been living a more joy-filled life since then.
Wow. And what was the real turning point for you? Because I know when we spoke before the show, we were talking about Christianity and how you felt that it had failed you almost. Is that what it felt like? Obviously, you mentioned your grandfather's death. Is that I'm a Christian. I grew up as a Catholic, and I can really relate to going to church, and you do your duty, as it were, and going to church and praying. And then when something happens to you in your life that is not supposed to happen to you, like you mentioned, being molested, or a family member passing away, and then you feel that you've been abandoned almost by God. How did it manifest for you in terms of that relationship that you had with God? Because it sounds as if that the relationship was not as strong as you hoped it would be, and almost that you felt abandoned. Is that right?
Yes, well, God and I had a roller coaster of a relationship. It was like, hold on tight, and then, how could you? I'm so mad at you, never talking to you again. So up and down, a lot of prodigal child, me running away and then coming back, and several times. But I finally realized that I can't do it without God, even though I may be mad at him for things that I think that he did or allowed to happen. And I mean, he knows everything. And how am I going to make it through life without the omniscient God? But what brought me back to God is that he actually spoke to me. I was it was after my husband had taken me back and they brought me back to life, but I was still having these chronic health issues. It was super hard for me to function. I couldn't stay awake, and it just kept precipitating. And I was in a point of almost having a pity party. I remember I was looking at a Beth Moore book, and I was like, no, that's not the answer. I was about to start the spiral down, but I felt a voice tell me, Violet, I love you unconditionally. Whether you do or you don't do anything at all, I love you fully and completely, because I had been trapped in performance. It was like, God, I'm checking all these boxes. I'm praying. I'm doing the thing. I'm going to church. So I fell in a trap of self-righteousness, but it's not because of me. It's because of what Jesus already did. And I realized that, there was nothing I could do that could make him love me more. And even if I didn't do what he said because I was tired that day, or even if I don't feel like it, okay, maybe I wouldn't get the blessing that he's trying to give me, but he's not mad at me.
Yeah.
He loved me, and that was like such a huge burden off of me. Even if I failed, he was like, okay, I'll fix it. I'm your redeemer. I'm watching out for you. So just seeing God in a different light rather than seeing God as, he's out to punish me. And
Yeah,
it was a huge, huge difference.
I think that's such an important point, because it's so easy, isn't it? Especially when you're growing up as a child and you are in a certain environment that has a faith wrapped around it, whatever faith that happens to be, and it can feel oppressive in terms of you have to perform in order to be accepted. And if you don't, there's a consequence. And the consequence for yourself sounds like you won't be loved, or you'll be rejected in some way, shape, or form. It can create an enormous psychological burden on you to need to continuously show up and be at church, like you mentioned, to be at church, to keep going, to do it twice a week, to do your prayers, to do your Hail Marys, to do all your penance and everything. And it gets to a point sometimes for people, like it sounds like it did for you, where it was never for you felt like you were doing enough to please him. And so you get into this really vicious cycle that it's almost like I'm not enough. And that cycle keeps going, and it will play back based on our past experiences. And we'll start, like you talked about, the garden, is we'll associate what we're doing now with past experiences, and in essence strengthen the growth of the weeds rather than feeding the beautiful trees that you have and allowing those trees to grow.
Right. And also my identity in Christ, I was believing lies that I was a black sheep, that I had mental health issues running in my family, because one of my uncles, he was on lithium or something. And even I was diagnosed with, what is it called? Some personality disorder, which by the definition, I can see why they would think that. But now nobody would know that I was dealing with all those things. And I was set free. But our brain, it looks for evidence when you focus on something. And I was focusing on, oh, I'm the black sheep. I'm never going to get it right. I'm never going to figure this out. So my brain was looking for evidence for that, and it found it.
Right. But I mean, what we put our attention to is how we show up. So,
but then when you open the Bible and you see yourself how God sees you, then I mean, I had memorized parts of the Bible as a child. I would win prizes for memorizing the Bible. And I'm looking at these verses now, and it's like, fruit of the Spirit is what? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. It was in me all along.
Yeah. And it's just about opening those shutters, isn't it? And letting the light in, and knowing that it's in there inside of you. But sometimes, based on our life circumstances, and when you were molested at age 5, that's when your brain is incredibly young and developing. And so your survival mechanism is what you have at the age of 5. And so you do what's necessary to survive at that age. And for you, it was not talk about it, because that was your survival coping mechanism. And obviously that would have manifested throughout your life, is not talking about it, not expressing yourself. It became quite difficult. And like you say, you start looking for these things based on your mindset. If you're in a negative mindset, you'll look for all the things that are negative. But if you're in a positive mindset, then you start to look for the great things that happened in the day. So I'd love to know, what was the real shift? So you mentioned you went, obviously you felt that God had really left you when your grandfather died, and you spiraled really down quickly. But fortunately, your husband and the medical professionals saved you. And he's ultimately the angel for me, how I see, he's your angel walking on earth. What was the big turning point for you in your journey? How did you start realizing that you are enough and joy sits within you? How did you start peeling back those layers to reveal the joy that was inside all along?
Yeah, well, I think Holy Spirit had a lot to do with it, because even when I was seeking help. I was hospitalized twice, Baker acted twice. Once because, they had to bring me back to life, and another time just because I wanted help.
Yeah.
And but it wasn't like an actual moment that just whoop, it flipped the switch. I was basically like, well, I tried it. Let me try something else. And I actually had another prodigal moment during that time, and I was hanging around the wrong people. But the people that I was hanging around with were non-judgmental. At least I saw them non-judgmental. They accepted me. We would go out dancing and drinking, which is totally not the right thing to do. But God still was watching over me and was taking me on this journey little by little to where I was, perfectionism and being safe and all that had kept me trapped. So I couldn't be myself. And when I was going on these little outings, I felt like, more laid back and not having to worry about what people thought and that just brought me joy. And that was the first time that I started feeling joy. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what is this feeling? I like it. I want more of it.
And what were those outings that you used to go on? Were they trips with the church, or what were they?
No, unfortunately, like I said, I was still going to church because I knew I had to hang on to God. But I was over here hanging out doing the wrong thing.
Okay.
Because I was still trying to figure things out. I didn't totally trust God.
Okay.
So it was just like ladies' night, going out drinking.
Oh, okay.
But then I figured out that, these women needed help. And how was I supposed to help them if I'm not fully having a relationship with God? How am I supposed to pray for them, help them to get out of whatever issues they were having? So that's when I was like, I am leaving this, going back fully to God. But that was me just like letting go and being able to not worry about being judged or doing things right. And that helped me to start feeling joy. So that's why I write about my happiness strategies. And then God also, he told me at one point in time to not do anything at all. All I needed to do was focus on supplements. Because I met a naturopathic doctor that actually put a name to what some of the health issues that I had. So I was like, oh, okay, first joy, now I have hope. Let me try this. And how do people with cancer and those type of serious decisions make it? Is to be positive. And that's what I try to do. I'm doing affirmations, thinking positively. And not that it was a blessing, but I couldn't get upset. Otherwise, I would be out for 1 or 2 days. My body was so sick that it couldn't handle negative emotions. I was so sensitive. I could feel it throughout the day.
Wow.
If I was disappointed or frustrated, I could feel it like, a burden, another burden, more burden, So I started realizing, wow, our emotions, those could really make a big difference in my life, whether I focus on positivity, letting things go, not crying over spilled milk kind of thing. And, or being upset at myself, being mad that I'm sick. And so God took me through a period of rest, and he took care of everything. And I was like, oh my goodness, nobody died. The world is still going. It's not all on my shoulders. So another layer, came off that just helped me to be less micromanaging, less OCD, and more like, oh, whatever happens, that's fine. And I'm not perfect in any of these at all. I am still growing and learning, which is also encouraging because there's new levels of joy that I'm going to experience later.
Right, exactly. There's always another level. And I'd love to know, you mentioned that you had mercury poisoning because of the fillings in your teeth, which many people may still have in their teeth. When did you realize that was causing some of the brain fog issues and also quite possibly some of the depressive issues that you were experiencing? When did you realize that was causing you problems?
Yeah, and that was quite a relief that my naturopathic doctor told me about that, because I thought it was just me. I came to a point where I couldn't even understand what you said because my brain would only hold on to the last word you told me.
Yeah.
But my naturopathic doctor, he said, oh, the mercury combined with the braces, it didn't just have like a addition effect, it had an exponential effect. So X to the whatever power.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, so putting a name to what I had, it just relieved me because I'm not crazy, you know.
Yeah, and it can hugely. I know people who've been hugely impacted by mercury poisoning. Dr. Mark Hyman is, one of them who talks a lot about functional medicine. But I have friends who've been impacted in the coaching world as well, and it just really completely destroys your brain function because you've got these toxins in your brain that are limiting your ability for your brain to work properly. And like you say, brain fog is a classic, and also depressive symptoms are another classic symptom that you may experience. How long did it take for you to get your brain back, as it were, from a functional perspective after they were taken out?
Well, my naturopathic doctor put me on some detox protocols, and then I had to change naturopathic doctor. So I didn't get the mercury out right away because that would have been more detrimental to my health, according to my naturopathic doctor. Yeah. He had to make sure that my body was strong enough to handle the surgery. And thank God that we did find somebody that could actually do it safely, because sometimes they just take it out however, and then you swallow the mercury. And so even that was important, to find somebody that knew how to do it in a safe way.
Wow.
But it didn't take long at all, surprisingly. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Like, you were saying that the story is fascinating. Me looking back, the story is fascinating to me, that I can walk, that I have my brain functions back. But I did want to mention, just in case anybody out there might need to hear this, when I have my menstrual cycle, these things, I start noticing them again. So I have to be very careful during that time, because I notice that those patterns start, and I'm like, oh, that's why. And I think men also go through some hormonal cycles, but I noticed that for some reason, you may know, I don't know what the medical reason is, but I noticed that I get kind of sensitive, and though I get tempted to go back into a little bit of a depression.
Yeah, I mean, our hormones enormously regulate our mood, and they're part of our mood regulation just generally. And so it can obviously, for women, as we go through our cycle, it can hugely impact us. I know for me personally, when I was much younger, I always knew that I was just about to start my menstrual cycle, because I'd have a dizzy day where I'd lose everything. I wouldn't remember where I put anything. And I'd also have a crying day, which could be the same day or the following day, but it would always be a sign that I was just about to go into my menstrual cycle. So it affects us all differently, depending on how our hormones influence our brain, and our brain type as well. So depending on how your brain has developed, and how your hormones regulate themselves, because we don't all have the same hormonal fluctuations. We can be wildly varied.
Yeah, my mom and sister don't get the same symptoms that I get.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think we really necessarily acknowledge it. And, you know, for women, it can be hugely like a roller coaster journey, like you mentioned with God, but actually with your own self, it can be an enormous roller coaster journey in the month, because you can go from a great high and feeling very, you know, when you're in the fertile period, you feel very sensual, or some women may do, to feeling very low, just before your period starts, or even during your period itself, depending on the pains and the cramps that you're experiencing. So
yeah, but thank God that the brain fog, once it was treated, I mean, I felt a lot better almost right away. I want to say within a couple of months.
wow, that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. I'm so pleased. And I know you mentioned, you know, when you were in your darker place, you were experiencing emotional pain, you're experiencing physical pain, it's experiencing mental pain, but also it sounds like you're experiencing spiritual pain, because you couldn't get connected with the spirit, and also with what you were passionate about, with your core values, with the direction of travel you wanted to go in life. And they're like the four quadrants of our well-being, and we often only pay attention to one or two of them. Often we talk about our mental and physical well-being, but actually our emotional well-being is hugely important, as you know, as well as our spiritual well-being, is that connection to ourselves and loving ourselves, because it's the longest relationship we'll ever have, is the relationship we have with ourselves, and also connecting to a higher power, or to the planet, whatever your faith happens to be, or whatever you feel really grounds you, is really important as well. And I love that you talked about the 5 pillars of brain health as you went on your journey, which is your feelings, your actions, your connection to yourself and to others, and also to God, the thoughts that were driving your emotions, your feelings, and also how your surroundings influenced you too. So I'd love to dive into the 5 pillars to do a fun facts quiz now, if you're ready.
Sure.
So let's just go. So feelings, which feelings drive everything. So there are emotions, and I often like to think they're the programs that run in the back of our mind, and if we don't pay attention to them, then we can quickly spiral downwards if we're in a negative mindset. So let's go with the positives. What is the funniest thing that has ever happened to you?
Can I also say my most embarrassing?
Absolutely, yeah. Happy to. Some people get really embarrassed saying they're most embarrassing, but if you're good to go with that one, that's great.
Yeah, well, the most embarrassing is when I was growing up, I would wet the bed.
Oh.
And that was, oh my gosh, so embarrassing. And I actually felt a little bit embarrassed mentioning it here.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the first thing I thought of when I read that statement. And I'm like, because I'm embarrassed, I'm going to mention it, because I'm going to beat this. I'm not going to be embarrassed about it anymore. I was young. There were things that I was going through. And yes, it was embarrassing. But hey, look where I am now. And
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
I just want to say, you know, you're not the only person that's mentioned that on the show. So Barbara Gustafson, who was previously on the show, talked about her embarrassing experience when she was young. And I always used to have the struggle of wetting myself as well when I was little, especially if my family tickled me.
Oh.
And actually bedwetting is a sign that there's trauma.
Yeah,
For
that's what
kids,
I
I
thought.
think people think it's funny, but actually it's typically a sign that the child has experienced some kind of trauma that needs to be addressed, because they're fearful, and so they wet the bed. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's really, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just a trauma that's not been dealt with, and it's really important that parents create the safe space for a child and understand what it is that is bothering them so that they can unchain their pain. And there are many ways you can do that, and I have a course on my site to help parents help their children. So it's really important. So thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention, because it's a topic we don't really talk about, isn't it?
Yeah.
But so many of us experience as children, and we can hold on to it as almost a thing of shame, but there's no shame in it. It's just it's often associated with trauma.
And the more also that you leave things under the carpet, the more power they have. So
exactly,
just let them out.
Yes, let it out.
Especially if it helps other people.
Exactly. Actions. What's the most rewarding or fulfilling thing you've ever done?
Did you want to hear the funniest though?
Oh yeah,
About
we'll
feelings?
go with that. Yeah, go back with the feelings. That we've done the embarrassing. Let's go with the funniest.
Well, since I started feeling joy and wanting to enjoy life, no matter if I wasn't feeling well or whatever, if things weren't ideal, I went on this journey of, we've got to do something exciting, adventurous. And we were living in Germany when we traveled to Switzerland. My husband was in the military, and they sometimes have little excursions that they prepare for us. And I was like, oh, awesome, I'm going to go skiing. And me thinking it was going to be super easy, I just got on this big old lift. First of all, we went the wrong way because we didn't know how to speak the language and we didn't know how to read the map. And I went on this big old ski, which should have been a red flag. Like, wow, if it's a big ski lift, that means that this is probably an expert ski lift, not like the little buttons that the children hold to go up the hill. So, I got on this ski lift and I was stumbling on there, and I got on there, and at first it was like Jurassic Park, like, ooh, like beautiful. You get to go up top and see this beautiful blanketed countryside with snow and all these amazing trees. But then I was coming off the lift and I had no idea how to come off.
It was like a Bridget Jones moment.
But I'm like, okay, I'm just going to watch what everybody else is doing. They're doing this to the skis, and then they just go. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to and go, and bam, flat on my face, stop the whole lift. People that were getting on from miles behind us were like, what happened? Oh my goodness. It was kind of embarrassing, but super funny at the same time.
Well, at least you didn't hurt yourself. I'm so pleased. That was such a Bridget Jones moment. I just brought back the flashbacks from the film Bridget Jones. Oh wow, I'm so pleased you didn't hurt. Did you hurt yourself? You didn't, did you? Yeah, so many people can do. So
the snow was very fluffy there in Switzerland.
Lucky.
So yeah,
it would have been so different.
Just my pride. But thank God I wasn't never going to see any of those people again. So.
What's the going on to the next pillar, which is actions? What's the most rewarding or fulfilling thing you've ever done?
Well, in graduate school, even when I started going back to school after I had the do nothing phase, I went back to college, finished my degree, and they had us do these little discussion boards because I was doing virtual school, and instead of actually interacting with a student face to face, we would have to discuss things on a discussion board, and I could barely write like 100-word discussion board thing. And then in graduate school, they had us writing these papers, but the most rewarding thing was writing my book.
Yay!
Going from not being able to write 100 discussion words, and to just sitting down one afternoon. I just have a chapter in this book, but I was able to just write your story and not overthink it, not perfectionism, just get it out there the way it comes out. And so that was a major, major win.
Well done you.
Thank you.
And Amy, she was on the show, Amy Kardashian, in episode 4. She wrote her book, and she's acutely dyslexic.
Oh,
And so
wow.
it don't let anything stand in your way of writing if that's what you really want to do, because you've got the power to do it. If you really want to do something, the only person's opinion that matters is your own. So well done you for doing that. Thank you for sharing that. So I'd love to go on to the next one, which is connection to yourself. What is the most important value that guides you in life?
Fun.
Brilliant.
I like fun and freedom, but I think fun right now is it's very special because it even helps me get over fear. Some people say faith over fear, but I guess I don't have enough faith.
So fun over fear.
Yeah, when I make something fun, when I have to go on a presentation, or whenever I feel a little trepidation about something new that I'm going to do in my life, or I'm doing a project, if I make it fun, it just makes it so much easier to get through, and I change the outlook on it, and everything just becomes easier.
I think fun over fear equals faith.
Okay.
Because you've got faith in yourself that you can figure it out. So I think it goes hand in hand, and I love that fun over fear, because we can get ourselves so tied up in knots, can't we?
Yeah.
And not see the excitement in doing something. And actually, excitement and fear are almost the same, but one is a positive emotion, but with the same physiological effects. So our heart races. We want to do something. We may start sweating. We may start breathing faster. But actually, one of them is excitement and fun, and the other one is fear. So when we can shift it and turn it into looking at it in a positive way, where it's fun and not fear, is really powerful. Is taking that physiological. So this is like taking your emotion and your actions and looking at how you can mesh them together in a positive way. So I love that.
Yeah.
I'd love to go on thoughts now, because when we started the conversation, it was thoughts that really started you on a downward spiral. Is the thoughts that you were telling yourself and listening to, more importantly, that really weren't serving you and they were hurting you. So when you think back to your thoughts, what's the stupid or crazy thought you've often told yourself in the past that isn't true?
Wow, so many.
I've got another book to write.
Yeah, well, even like recently, because my husband made $5,000 last month on a sales challenge that we were having, and I didn't make anything. So I was thinking, oh, I guess entrepreneurship's not for me. Oh, I guess so and so is God's favorite. I'm not his favorite anymore. I lost that position. I'm never going to reach my goals. Why even try? Just all these thoughts just try to come back. I think because I gave them so much power in the past that I guess in my neurons, there's still a little bit of a pathway there. So it's like where my brain is used to going through that road, just like in a trail, you can tell where people
it's well
worn, right? So they try to come back, but when I talk to my husband, and then he helps me to remember who I am in Christ, that he has good plans for me, and that I am loved, and I am good enough. I am worth it.
And I love that analogy you talked about, that the trails were well worn, because that's exactly how it works in your mind. Is when you keep walking the trail, it will keep getting more visible and stronger and easier to walk. But if we just spend our time and attention on the positive things in life and less of attention on the negative, and challenge the negative self-talk by asking ourselves, is it true? And there's 5 steps. Is it true? Is it 100% true? How do I feel with that thought? How do I feel without it? And then we create the turnaround to the thought, which is the opposite. So I'm not enough is one I think you just mentioned. I'm never going to make it I'm never going to make it is not true, because you can. So we challenge it. How do you feel with it? Not very good. How would you feel without it? Really empowered. What's the turnaround of the thought? I can make it. I've done it before and I can do it again. And then we'd use that as that's an example. It's got to be right for you. But then we use that as our positive affirmation to move us forward in life. And what happens then is we start carving our own trail that's in a positive direction. And it's hard to carve a new path. It's like getting your machete out and creating a new one. But as you start building this new path, all the weeds start growing on the old one. And it's much harder to go back because you've let the plants and the trees grow that need to grow there. And that hot path is not as easy to go back on. And the longer you leave it, the more those weeds will grow, and then eventually you can't go back because the path's no longer there. And that's the power of our mind, is that actually if we don't pay attention to our negative thoughts, our brain naturally prunes itself because it needs to be efficient. So pay attention to the positive ones, pay no attention to the negative ones, and your brain will naturally prune away the negativity. So that's why positive affirmations are so powerful and so important.
And also celebrating your wins.
Right,
because
exactly.
The way I fought some of those thoughts were like, oh, remember the summit on Christian suicide prevention that you did with Tom Ziegler and Joyce Meyer's daughter and Marilyn Hickey's daughter? Like, what do you mean you can't do this and you're not worth? Yeah.
So you have to look for the examples, the evidence that squashes the negative thought, the ant.
Yeah.
And you did that, and that's so important as we take the power away from those thoughts. Because once we take the power away, once we understand the emotions that are tied in, because emotions have power, when we understand all of that, we can break the chain and win back our own personal power. So great job. Well done. So I'd love to go on to surroundings now. What is the most beautiful place you've ever visited, and what makes it so special?
That is a tough one because there are so many beautiful places that my husband and I have visited. Like I said, we lived in Germany. We got to visit all the surrounding countries there. We would just look at a map, point there, and we say, okay, let's take a day trip there. We lived in Florida, Miami, and we visited a lot of the beaches there. We lived in Colorado.
Wow,
gorgeous,
it's all over.
14ers, lots of beautiful mountains. But just our trip to Hawaii right before the pandemic was so special. Not only because it was gorgeous, but also all the miracles that God did. And, it was a last minute trip and it was challenging at first, but everything worked out. And we actually went island hopping from the Big Island to, I think it's Oahu, wherever Honolulu is. And we were going to be there for the fireworks. So during the day we were like, well, what do we do? Oh, we like hiking, a little bit of light hiking, especially now that I'm better and I can walk and everything. And so we went up this mountain called Diamond Head Trail. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I haven't actually.
And it was such a pain because you have to climb all these steps. It's like 100 steps. I don't know, a huge number of steps. I don't even want to remember because if I think about it, it would have stopped me from probably going up there. I don't know. I like adventure anyway. But you had to crawl under this thing and then you look up and you're on top seeing the whole ocean and the island.
Wow.
It was like I don't even know how to describe it. It was like heaven on earth.
Wow, that
Gorgeous,
sounds wonderful.
gorgeous.
That
And
sounds
that's
wonderful.
actually us up there, my husband and I.
Oh, okay. I
That's
can
that
see just in the
picture.
background. I'd love to go back, if we will, because we've got to surroundings, and surroundings massively influence us. If we go back to the time when you were at your deepest, darkest place, how did you leverage the power of not only your mind but also the power of what was around you to break free from the suicidal thoughts that you were having, if you don't mind going back there again, because I think it's a really important topic for some people.
Well, it was a little bit challenging for me because I didn't know how to get help.
Mm-hmm.
Counseling didn't help. It actually made things worse. Antidepressants made things worse. Me trying to get help made things worse. There was
How
actually...
did counselling make it worse for you? Because I think this is a really important point, because some people, it's very difficult to talk about stuff, and sometimes when we do talk about stuff, it strengthens those networks that we don't want to be revisiting. We don't want to be going back down the path. How did it make it worse for you?
Yeah, for one, it had me relive the same thing over and over.
Yeah,
It's like if the person that was hurting me over and over again.
Yeah.
And also the gentleman that was doing the counseling with me, he was trying to mimic me, but I found that disrespectful. I'm like, you should be awake and model what I'm supposed to be, but he was trying to mirror me.
Okay.
And I was in a despondent, tired state.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was like, that's so rude. And then my psychiatrist tells me, you're not as bad as you think. And I'm like, okay, I've had multiple suicide attempts. I have like cuts all over my body. I bled a puddle of blood, and I want to go and jump in front of a bus right now or jump out of a window, and you say I'm not as bad as I think.
Yeah, that's pretty much not what you want them to say, is it, when you really chronically need of support?
Yeah. And then also I felt uncomfortable because one of the exercises that one of the psychologists was doing with me, which he had a doctorate, was like for me to ground myself, and which I understand the exercise now, but when he was describing it, he was describing my bra touching me, and I had experienced sexual abuse, and this was a man telling me to feel my bra.
Yeah,
and
that's pretty insensitive.
that kind of triggered me.
Yeah. And I think it's really important you bring those points up, because professionals make mistakes.
Yeah.
And if you need help, and the person that you've got is not serving you and not providing you with the right support, then it's important that you keep searching for that support that's going to serve you.
But it's hard because
it is hard.
I was scared to get Baker acted again. So why am I going to go seek help again?
Yeah.
I ran away from an army installation because they were going to, hospitalize me again.
Yeah, it is hard. It is hard. I mean, here in the UK, we have a very difficult crisis because there isn't enough mental health support in the system of the NHS to serve people, and the waiting lists are insane. So, what we do within the academy, the Wellbeing Warrior Academy, is offer weekly group coaching. So people have instant access to support, and they don't actually have to say anything about their experience to unchain some of their pain. which is so important for people who have been in a position of abuse, molestation, whatever it happens to be, who actually, like you say, you don't want to talk about it. You just want to be set free of the pain and suffering that you're in. You don't want to have to go and revisit it over and over and over and over again, in the hope that talking about it's actually going to make it easier. It sometimes doesn't do that by any stretch of the imagination. Like you say, it's a place you don't want to go.
What helped me more was going to the beach, getting some sun, getting some fresh air, getting away from, the four walls where I was bored, and being reminded of that I was nothing, or all those negative thoughts just swimming in my head. Having a change of scenery.
Yeah. And connecting with nature is such a powerful tool. From a mental health perspective. There's so many studies that have shown the benefits of just stepping outside, like you say, our four walls, and connecting with nature, and knowing that beauty is all around us. We just have to go look for it, and beauty is within us. We just need to go look there too.
Yeah. And it was interesting when we moved here to San Antonio, Texas. You know how they say they suggest for you to stop and smell the roses? We have a rose bush right outside of our house. So in the pandemic, we would take our walks every day and admire those huge, beautiful smelling flowers. And yeah, nature does help.
It does help. It does help. Violet, it's been amazing talking to you. What one piece of advice would you give to anybody who has experienced had a traumatic experience, and is having suicidal thoughts, and they're struggling to find hope and find joy in life? What would your one piece of advice be to people who are in that position at this time?
Well, for one, there is hope. Look at my story. I went from totally on one side in the darkness to now living more in the light. And look at what I would have missed. We've had so many adventures, beautiful things happen. My life has been turned around. And, another thing is always remember that God loves you. He loves you just the way you are. He's never given up on you. He has you in the palm of his hand. He wants to run there to you in whatever circumstance that you're in. And you can always call on him for help, for him to comfort you, for just feel his loving embrace, because he loves you unconditionally. But of course, if you're in a crisis situation, please get help, because you do matter.
You do matter. And one of the crisis lines is to talk to the Samaritans if you're in dire need of needing somebody to talk to. So we'll put the link below in the show notes. Violet, how can people get hold of you and find out more about the amazing work that you do in your book and everything else that is happening in your life right now?
Yeah, they can reach me on my website at www.violetdetre.com. And also I'm on YouTube, as you mentioned earlier, and on Instagram, it's Violet_Detre.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you, Violet, so much for coming on the show. It's been absolutely a brilliant pleasure talking to you, hearing your story, and hearing that you found hope. And we like, as Amy Kardashian says, hope is having open possibilities every day. And we all can find that little piece of hope. And if you can't find it, get somebody to help you find it with you. Thank you, Violet, for coming on the show.
My honor. Thank you as well.
So remember, this show is all about brain health, unchaining your pain. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You have the power to make it better. And Violet has been here with us to show you how. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation. Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to like and share this episode and leave a review on my website or on Apple Podcasts. If you're looking for opportunities to optimize your brain health
or unchain your pain from a past trauma, make sure you visit my website, www.ruthmaryallan.com, and use the code podcast10 at checkout to get 10% off all programs. And always remember, you are not stuck with the brain you have. You have the power to make it better. You have the power to unchain your pain and optimize your brain power and performance so that you can win back energy and time doing what you love.
Each episode of Brain Health Unchaining Your Pain with Dr. Ruth Allan is for educational and demonstration purposes only. The information shared in each episode should not be interpreted as medical advice. This episode should not be used to self-diagnose or self-treat any health, medical, or physical condition. Do not use this episode to avoid going to your healthcare professional or to replace the advice they give you. Consult with a trusted healthcare professional before doing anything contained in this episode. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact www.ruthmaryallan.com/connect.